There is a quiet tragedy that unfolds every single day. Not in hospitals, not on battlefields, not in the pages of history, but inside ordinary people. People who wake up each morning, follow the same routines, wear the same smiles, say the same words, and slowly mistake survival for living. From the outside, nothing appears wrong. They have careers, responsibilities, friends, perhaps even families. Yet beneath the surface, something feels strangely absent. A quiet emptiness they cannot explain. A feeling that life is happening, but they are not truly inside it. Carl Jung believed this is one of the greatest psychological dangers a human being can face. Not dying too soon, but reaching the end of life without ever becoming who you truly were. Because there is a profound difference between existing and living. Existing asks only that you keep breathing. Living asks that you become conscious. Most people never question the life they inherit. They inherit beliefs, ambitions, fears, definitions of success, ideas about love, ideas about happiness, ideas about who they are supposed to become. And then they spend decades protecting an identity they never consciously chose. Jung called this identity the persona, the mask we develop so we can be accepted by the world. The persona is not evil. It is necessary. Without it, society would be difficult to navigate. But there is a hidden danger. The longer you wear the mask, the easier it becomes to forget there is a face beneath it. One day you wake up and realize you've become excellent at playing a role, but you've lost contact with the person playing it. That is the quiet crisis of modern life. Not that people are living falsely on purpose, but that they have become so identified with who they are expected to be. They no longer remember who they are. And perhaps the most frightening part is that this can happen without you ever noticing. You can spend an entire lifetime climbing a ladder, only to discover it was leaning against the wrong wall. Carl Jung believed that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But before that can happen, something uncomfortable must occur. The life you've been performing must begin to feel unbearable, because only when the mask starts to crack can the real journey begin. Most people believe the greatest moments in life are the ones where everything finally comes together. Carl Jung believed the opposite. He believed that the most important moments are often the ones where everything begins to fall apart. The career that no longer feels meaningful. The relationship that can no longer hide its emptiness. The dream that suddenly feels borrowed. The identity that once gave you certainty but now feels strangely foreign. At first, these moments feel like failure. You wonder why your motivation has disappeared. Why the life you worked so hard to build no longer satisfies you. Why success feels strangely hollow. But perhaps nothing is going wrong. Perhaps something far more important is happening. Perhaps your soul has simply grown beyond the life your ego created. Jung believed there comes a point when the unconscious refuses to remain silent. It begins sending signals, not through words, but through restlessness, through recurring dreams, through anxiety that seems to have no obvious cause, through a quiet feeling that says, "This cannot be all there is." Many people mistake these moments for weakness. They distract themselves. They become busier. They chase another promotion, another relationship, another achievement, another distraction. Anything to avoid sitting alone with the uncomfortable question rising from within. What if I had been living someone else's life? That question terrifies the ego, because the ego survives by protecting what is familiar. Even if what is familiar is making you miserable, the unknown feels dangerous. The known feels safe. So it convinces you to stay exactly where you are. Keep performing. Keep pleasing. Keep pretending. Keep calling it life. Jung warned that this is how people slowly drift away from themselves. Not through one dramatic decision, but through thousands of small betrayals. Every time you silence your intuition to gain approval. Every time you choose comfort over truth. Every time you ignore what your inner voice has been trying to tell you. A small part of you falls asleep. And eventually, you become a stranger to your own soul. This is why so many people experience what appears to be a crisis in the middle of life. Jung did not see it as a breakdown. He saw it as an invitation. The first half of life is often spent building an identity the world rewards. The second half asks a far more difficult question. Now that you've become who everyone expected, who are you really? Very few people have the courage to answer, because answering honestly may require dismantling an entire life. It may mean walking away from identities you've spent years protecting. It may mean disappointing people who only love the version of you that was convenient. It may mean standing alone while everything familiar begins to disappear. And yet, Jung believed this was not the end of life. It was the beginning of it. Because the greatest prison is not one built from walls. It is one built from unconscious habits, inherited beliefs, and borrowed identities. The moment you begin questioning those invisible chains, you take your first real step toward freedom. And that is where the true challenge begins. Because discovering who you are is infinitely more difficult than becoming who the world told you to be. Becoming who the world told you to be is simple. From the moment you are born, the world begins handing you a script. Be successful. Be admired. Be productive. Be agreeable. Be the person everyone expects you to become. Very few people ever stop to ask a question so profound that it has the power to change an entire life. Who would I be if no one had ever told me who I should become? Carl Jung believed that this question stands at the very heart of individuation. Not becoming someone new, but uncovering the person who has been buried beneath years of conditioning. The tragedy is that many people mistake adaptation for authenticity. They become experts at reading rooms, experts at anticipating expectations, experts at saying exactly what will earn acceptance. Slowly, almost invisibly, they begin outsourcing their identity. Their worth becomes dependent on applause. Their confidence depends on achievement. Their happiness depends on being approved of. Without realizing it, they hand the steering wheel of their life to everyone except themselves. This is why external success can never completely satisfy an unconscious life. You can earn more money, gain more recognition, collect more accomplishments, yet still feel as though something essential is missing. Because the soul cannot be nourished by achievements that were never truly its own. Jung saw this pattern repeatedly. People arrived believing they had lost meaning. But often, meaning had not been lost. It had simply been buried beneath years of performance. Imagine an actor who spends decades playing the same character. Every day, he speaks the same lines, makes the same expressions, lives inside the same role. Eventually, something unexpected happens. He forgets where the character ends and where he begins. Now imagine that actor trying to remember who he really is. Would it happen overnight? Of course not. He would first have to notice the habits that no longer belong to him, the voice that isn't really his, the reactions learned from the script, the emotions performed rather than felt. The same process unfolds within the human psyche. For years, you may believe your fears belong to you. Your ambitions belong to you. Even your personality belongs to you. Until consciousness quietly asks, "Are you certain?" Perhaps your fear of failure was inherited from parents who feared disappointment. Perhaps your obsession with productivity grew from believing your worth had to be earned. Perhaps your constant need to be liked began as a child simply trying to feel safe. The unconscious absorbs these lessons long before the conscious mind learns to question them. That is why Jung insisted that self-knowledge is one of the hardest tasks a human being can undertake. It is not simply learning new information. It is separating what is genuinely yours from everything that has been placed upon you. And that process can feel deeply unsettling, because every layer you remove leaves another question waiting beneath it. If I am not my career, who am I? If I am not my reputation, who am I? If I am not my trauma, who am I? If I stop living to impress others, what kind of life do I actually want? Most people avoid these questions because there are no instant answers. The unconscious unfolds slowly, like the sunrise. It cannot be rushed. It reveals itself only to those willing to remain patient with the mystery. Jung understood that the modern world often encourages the opposite. Move faster, produce more, stay distracted, never stop, never sit in silence long enough to hear your own soul speaking. Because silence can be frightening. In silence, there are no performances, no applause, no audience, only you, standing face to face with yourself. And for many people, that is the most unfamiliar relationship they have ever known. Yet Jung believed this solitude is not punishment. It is preparation, because you cannot build an authentic life while remaining a stranger to yourself. Every meaningful transformation begins the same way, not by changing the world around you, but by becoming honest about the world within you. That honesty demands courage. The courage to admit that some dreams no longer belong to you. The courage to release identities that once felt safe. The courage to disappoint expectations that were quietly imprisoning your soul. This is why individuation is not a destination you arrive at. It is a lifelong conversation between your conscious mind and the deeper self that has been patiently waiting beneath every mask. The question is not whether that deeper self is calling you. It always is. The real question is whether you are willing to become quiet enough to finally hear its voice. Because the moment you do, life stops being something you merely survive. It begins to feel like something you were actually born to live. That is the life Carl Jung believed exists beyond fear, beyond approval, beyond the endless need to become someone else's idea of success. But reaching that life requires something most people spend their entire lives avoiding. The shadow. Of all Jung's ideas, none has been more misunderstood. Many people hear the word shadow and immediately imagine darkness, evil, or everything that is wrong with them. Jung meant something far more profound. The shadow is every part of yourself you have pushed out of awareness because, at some point, you learned it was unacceptable. Perhaps as a child you were told not to cry, so your sensitivity disappeared into the shadow. Perhaps you were taught that anger made you a bad person, so your ability to set boundaries went with it. Perhaps you learned that dreaming too boldly invited disappointment, so your ambition quietly retreated into the unconscious. The tragedy is that we rarely bury only our weaknesses. We often bury our greatest strengths alongside them. Jung understood that whatever the conscious mind rejects, the unconscious continues to carry. Nothing truly disappears. It simply waits, waiting for the moment it can be acknowledged, waiting for the moment you are finally ready to become whole. This is why so many people feel divided within themselves. Part of them longs to speak. Another part insists on remaining silent. Part of them craves freedom. Another part clings desperately to security. Part of them wants to love openly. Another part fears being wounded again. These are not signs that something is wrong with you. They are signs that your psyche is asking to be integrated. Jung never believed the goal of life was perfection. He believed the goal was wholeness. And those are two very different pursuits. Perfection demands that you eliminate every flaw. Wholeness asks that you understand every part of yourself, even the parts that make you uncomfortable, especially those parts. Because what you refuse to face eventually begins directing your life from the shadows. Unacknowledged fear becomes anxiety. Unexpressed anger becomes resentment. Ignored grief becomes emotional numbness. Denied insecurity becomes arrogance. The unconscious always finds a way to speak. The only question is whether it speaks through awareness or through suffering. This is why Jung believed suffering itself can become meaningful, not because pain is good, but because pain often reveals what comfort successfully hides. Think about the moments that changed you most. Were they the seasons when everything was easy? Or were they the moments when life stripped away everything you thought you needed? The relationship that ended, the dream that collapsed, the certainty that disappeared, the identity that no longer fit. In those moments, it can feel as though life is falling apart. But Jung would suggest another possibility. Perhaps life is removing everything that prevents you from meeting your authentic self. A sculptor doesn't create a masterpiece by adding endless layers of stone. He creates by removing everything that doesn't belong. Perhaps your soul works the same way. Every disappointment removes an illusion. Every loss reveals an attachment. Every challenge uncovers a strength you never knew you possessed. Slowly, almost invisibly, the person you were pretending to be begins to dissolve, and someone far more authentic begins to emerge. This is why the path of individuation is rarely dramatic. It happens quietly. One honest conversation, one difficult decision, one moment of choosing truth over comfort. Again and again and again, until one day you wake up and realize something extraordinary. The life you once thought you wanted no longer has the power to tempt you. The approval you once chased no longer determines your worth. The fears that once controlled your choices no longer define your future, not because you've become fearless, but because you've become conscious. And consciousness changes everything. You stop asking, how can I become more successful? And begin asking, how can I become more authentic? You stop asking, what will people think? And begin asking, what does my soul know that my fear keeps trying to silence? Perhaps that is the greatest transformation Jung ever described. The moment when your life is no longer guided by the expectations of the crowd, but by the quiet wisdom of the self. Because from that moment forward, you are no longer merely existing. You have finally begun the lifelong privilege of truly living. Carl Jung believed that very few people ever reach this place, not because they lack intelligence, not because they lack potential, but because becoming yourself demands a price that many are unwilling to pay. The price is certainty. The price is approval. The price is the comfort of remaining who you've always been. Most people spend their lives asking one question: how can I fit into the world? It seems like a reasonable question, but Jung believed it points in the wrong direction. A far more important question is this: how can I become the person I was created to be, even if the world doesn't understand me? Everything changes the moment you ask it. You stop measuring your life by comparison. You stop competing with people who are walking a completely different path. You stop chasing timelines that were never yours. You stop living according to clocks and begin living according to meaning. Because meaning is what gives life its depth. Not comfort, not applause, not endless achievement. Meaning. Jung observed that human beings can survive incredible suffering when they know why they are living. Yet even a comfortable life can feel unbearable when it is empty of purpose. That is why so many people wake up one morning with everything they thought they wanted and still feel something missing. They built the life society admired, but they neglected the soul that had to live inside it. The truth is, your soul is remarkably patient. It will wait while you chase titles. It will wait while you seek approval. It will wait while you wear masks that earn you acceptance. But it will never stop calling you home. Sometimes that call arrives as restlessness. Sometimes as heartbreak. Sometimes as failure. Sometimes as an unexpected moment of silence where you suddenly realize, I don't recognize the person I've become. Do not fear that moment. Respect it, because it may be the most honest conversation your soul has ever had with you. And perhaps this is what Jung wanted us to understand above everything else. Life is not asking you to become perfect. It is asking you to become whole, to embrace both your strength and your shadow, to make peace with your past instead of running from it, to stop searching for yourself in success, relationships, or the approval of strangers, and to discover that the person you've spent your entire life looking for has quietly been waiting within you all along. Imagine reaching the end of your life, looking back over every decision, every risk, every failure, every triumph. What would matter most? Not how admired you were, not how many people applauded you, not how perfectly you played the role the world assigned to you. What would matter is whether you had the courage to become yourself. Because there is no greater success than living a life that truly belongs to you. And there is no greater tragedy than leaving this world without ever meeting the person you were capable of becoming. So tonight, before you fall asleep, ask yourself one question: Not the question your ego wants answered. Not the question society keeps asking. Ask the question your soul has been whispering for years. Am I truly living, or have I simply become comfortable existing? Sit with that question. Don't rush to answer it. Let it challenge you. Let it unsettle you. Because sometimes the question that makes you uncomfortable today becomes the answer that transforms your entire life tomorrow. If this journey into Carl Jung's psychology helped you see yourself differently, subscribe to Inner Phoria, where we explore the hidden forces shaping the human mind, the unconscious, and the timeless wisdom that helps us become who we truly are. And if this video resonated with you, share it with someone who feels lost, trapped, or disconnected from themselves. You never know, one honest insight may become the beginning of their own journey toward authenticity. Until our next journey together, remember this. The world does not need another person pretending to be someone they are not. It needs people courageous enough to become who they have always been. Because the greatest achievement is not to build a successful life. It is to build a life your soul recognizes as home.